baseball than Mr. Baseball, Bob Uecker. Welcome to St. Louis. I know you're familiar with this town.
Absolutely. This is one of my favorite places to be, no matter if it's baseball or not. I spent two of the best years of my life, not my baseball career, here in St. Louis, and I love coming back here. I'm looking forward to tomorrow, Willie McGee Day here, and big crowd going to be on hand. Going to be a lot of fun.
Let's talk about your career. I know you've got a few hits in your career. I know you've made fun of it, but the 64 World Series, you were a part of it. I know McCarver got some starting time there, and you kind of helped him out on the bench.
Well, it was, I guess it got to the point where we wanted to win, you know. We won the pennant in 64 in the World's Championship with Timmy, and the next year we finished sixth with the exact same team, only I played a lot more. I played a lot more in 65, which took us from first to sixth, so I was proud of that.
You don't see many 65 Cardinals tributes back then. You hear about the 64, but not the 65 Cardinals.
Well, you know, we had I've been here for a couple of Cardinal reunions. We did a 20 and I think we did a 10 and a 20-year reunion. I'm looking for a 40-year job. I hope we're all around yet for a 40-year reunion, but I really had a lot of fun playing here. I did a show last night with Mike Shannon and Bob Gibson, excuse me, following the game, and we sat there and laughed for an hour about the things that happened during those two seasons that I was here with the Cardinals. And you know, there's a lot of guys that play baseball for a lot of years and are big time and big name players who have never been to a World Series. And you know, I feel bad for guys like that have never had the opportunity to experience that. The guy that comes to mind for me all the time is Ernie Banks. He was such a great player and a Hall of Famer, and never experienced a World Series. There's a lot more, but that to me was one of the highlights of my career, the day that the Braves informed me during the spring of 1964 that I was going to be traded to the St. Louis Cardinals, and we went on to win that year, and you know, everything else is history. But just to be able to wear that ring and to say that you were a part of the championship season here is something that a lot of players can't do.
Is that the ring right there? Is that the one?
This is a light beer ring.
No, we can't talk about that. We're in St. Louis. That's Miller. We don't talk Miller.
We're drinking 100 cases a day. No, this is a championship ring. Yeah, they're a lot bigger now, but yeah, that's a World Series ring, and mine's adjustable because there were, you know, different players coming in to wear it all the time. So, but no, we had a good time here. We really did. I was talking to Red Shandies before the game today. Johnny Keane was the manager in '64, and then Red took over the next year, and it was great here. I mean, just even coming back here to play in this ballpark after I got traded was nifty. I look at this park now, it's going to be kind of sad to see this place go. I know there's a new ballpark in the making now, but when you look around here and see the way they've renovated this place and the things they've done, this to me is baseball here, man. I love this place, I really do.
For a guy who hit like 212, 215, no offense.
No, you're a little high there.
They call you Mr. Baseball, though. That's pretty good that for a guy who didn't do what McGwire's done or what Babe Ruth has done, you're Mr. Baseball. I think that's kind of an accomplishment.
Well, I could have done those things, but I always look down the road, you know. I mean, anybody can go out and hit 300. You try and hit 200 and hang around the big leagues for 5 years, that is really hard. People say, well, it's easy to strike out. That's not true. Big league pitchers, sooner or later, somebody's going to hit your bat. So to have the ability to swing and lift or lower to avoid the baseball when it comes through the hitting zone, those are things that you learn during the off season. I never practiced during spring training because I didn't want to tip my hand. And I mean, if I had good years, year after year after year, you know what they do? You hit 310 one year, the next year they want you to hit 320. You hit 320, they want you to hit 330. So I always tried to hang around maybe 190, 200, maybe 3 or 4 RBIs a year, just so they're not going to put pressure on you the following year. Try to get them in September where you got something to deal with for the coming year. You didn't have multi-year deals then. I remember Bing Devine sitting right behind us here. I think my biggest year salary-wise here was St. Louis. I think I made $13,000, and 7 of that came from selling other players' equipment. So, you know, I mean, if you had a glove, if you wanted a glove or something, I'd take somebody's glove and I'd sell it. I didn't have a problem with that.
You and Johnny Carson are friends. Talk just about all those appearances because, as we said, again, another 100 hitter. We'll say 100. Let's go with that because you know they call it the Mendoza line, but you're way under that, obviously. But the appearances on Johnny Carson, did you become good friends with him, and how's that relationship going?
I did shows. I don't know. I think the first show I did like in 1969 was the first one, and all the way through his final show. And I would do 4 or 5 shows a year. I think I did something like 100 shows. And yeah, we got to be really good friends. And I don't see Johnny anymore. I see Doc Severinsen from time to time and Ed McMahon. But I never took that stuff serious. I wasn't serious about show business and any of that other stuff. Baseball, everything I do revolves around baseball. But I had some great times on the Tonight Show. I mean, the first show I ever did with him in New York, he didn't think I played ball. He asked Ed McMahon after the game, I'm not going to tell you what he said, so-and-so really play baseball. And he never thought I played. He really didn't. But I had a great time there all the time.
You're going to get to the radio booth, but I guess the biggest accomplishment was Mr. Belvedere, right?
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. I still see those people from the series. It ran for 6 years, which is a pretty good run for a sitcom. And the girl who played the daughter just had her second child. The oldest guy, the guy who played the oldest son, is a producer and director in Hollywood. The younger guy, Bryce Beckham, is I believe he's a senior now at USC. And Christopher Hewitt, who played Mr. Belvedere, whatever he's doing, he's eating. I know that. I don't know what he's doing, but I know he's eating. And the lady that played my wife, Eileen Graff, is still working and singing in L.A. They're all doing very good, absolutely.
So as a child actor, you were a good TV dad. Let's just say that, right? You've groomed those children very well.
You know, it's really funny how you live with those kids for that amount of time, and you really do become like a father. I mean, they do come to you with problems, and I did what I did with my kids: slap them, tell them to get the hell away. You know. No, they were
That sounds like my dad.
No, they were great kids. I love them to death, and none of them are in show business anymore. I mean, I guess they had enough of it then, and except for Rob, the oldest guy, who won an award a couple of years ago. He does a lot of stuff with the Navy flying team, and he's traveled the world with them, done great documentaries, and they're all doing very, very well. It was a lot of fun.
Well, thank you very much, but before we go, I got to have a little Harry Doyle. I mean, I love the Harry Doyle. You made major. Did you ad-lib a lot of that in the last couple ones, or was that all scripted? It seemed like it was all ad-libbed from the 2 and 3 at least.
No, it was all ad-libbed. They gave me an outline and said, "Be this guy," you know, and I could do whatever I wanted. It adds a little more work because you're constantly doing ad-lib lines, and they say, "Do more like that. Do another one like that. More stuff like that." Some of the stuff is scripted, but when writers write things, they get a lot of money to do it. So if you ask, instead of saying, "I'm not going to read this, could I try this, or can we do this?" Everybo's for it, and I think it works better that way. And we had a lot of fun making the films. I mean, the third one stunk, man. That thing was on the third one was Back to the Miners, I think. That thing was on an airplane the next day after we finished it. It was terrible. But first 2 were a lot of fun. Just a bit outside.
We thank Bob Uecker very much for joining us.
Probably the first is let's get people educated in town. Let's change and switch gears. Bob Uecker, you told a story about him on a podcast I was listening to. I try to check out things that you've been saying, and I was interested in your conversation, I think, with some media folks, Orand and their podcast, and you told the Bob Uecker story with the button. I was just curious, how well did you know him before you started broadcasting with him in '95, and if you have some favorites? He's a funny guy. I mean, there's not many more people as sharp as him. How well did you know him before you started working with him for the Baseball Network?
I knew him pretty well, but we really forged what is now a close friendship when we worked together in the 90s. And I'm not the only one to say this. Is he very funny on the air? Yes. Was he very funny with Johnny Carson? Yeah, Johnny wasn't that big a baseball fan, and he brought him back like 75 times. Was he hysterically funny in the Major League movies where he essentially wrote his own stuff or ad-libbed his own stuff? Yeah, great. But however funny you think that is, he is funnier still unfiltered. When he doesn't have to worry, and he doesn't really worry very much as it is about political correctness is just not a consideration for Bob. But there are some constraints when he's on the air. Off the air, this guy, I mean, comedians will tell you, Norm Macdonald, Artie Lange, people who've hung out with him, even though Norm and Artie kind of fell out with him when they crossed a certain line, which we can talk about later. But professional comedians view Uecker as, almost one of them. I've heard a lot of guys who do comedy for a living say that Bob Uecker is the funniest guy they've ever hung around with.
I think he's so quick. And it's funny too, because I like to listen to Brewers broadcasts when I'm clear up there, or if I can turn on the MLB app and just kind of plug him in. And it kind of makes me angry that he's doing the game straight. I want some Bob Uecker, I want Harry Doyle, and he's not going to give you much of that. He's going to give you the game, and he's great.
Yeah, it's true. And what's amazing, he's 87 years old. He'll be 88 in January. And most of us at some point start to decline a little bit, certainly when they get into their 80s. He sounds basically just the same as he did 20 years ago. His call of the game is excellent. I think he's still occasionally fun, but if you're listening and hoping that every single game you'll hear a gem from Bob, that's not going to happen. And part of the reason is when he's on the air on the radio, he's essentially working alone. If he has somebody to work off of, like we did on television, then it tends to open things up for him comedically a little bit more.
Yeah, and you mentioned in that podcast about the story was Norm went on Letterman and talked about how Bob would use the cough button, which I've seen Mike Shannon has done to me on the phone, where he's 2-1 pitch, and then he'll say something, and you're like, how did he? So there's a cough button, and Bob is saying some crazy stuff. But you mentioned Artie. I'm a huge Artie Lange fan, and I'm curious if he'll be on the HBO show. He had kind of a debut there one time. I don't think he'll be on, but I'm curious. Did you see that moment when he was with Joe Buck? Joe Buck basically sort of took on your time slot in that show. What did you think of that, and how would you have handled that? Because it was a different show than you were trying to do. I think Joe was trying to lighten up a little bit with a little more comedy, a little more entertainment flair. But what was your thoughts when you saw it, and how would you have handled a situation like that? Well,
two things. Artie Lange is not my cup of tea. I would not have invited him on. If I did 100 shows, I would not have invited him on. I thought it was very unfortunate for Joe because Artie stupidly ruined Joe's first show, and it sent the show into kind of a spiral, a downward spiral. So A, I wouldn't have had him on, but B, if I did, and he started to act that way, I would have thrown him off the show. We're not here for this. Take a hike. Here's something though. Joe is very talented and he's very good. Like on Brockmire, he's terrific. He's very good in these comedic situations. So there's no doubt that he can do a show that's a hybrid between sports and entertainment, that he can do comedic stuff. But people tend to want everything to go into one neat little category. So if it's like, oh, well, Bob was doing the serious journalistic stuff and Joe is more lighthearted, just look at who the guests were on the record. I had to make a choice. HBO made me choose between staying with them or going to the new baseball network. It's a tough choice, and I went to the baseball network. But right up until that time, among the guests on the show were Chris Rock and Jerry Seinfeld and Richard Lewis and Tina Fey and Rodney Dangerfield and Billy Crystal and Jon Stewart and on and on and on. So this idea that one guy's straight-laced and the other guy's more freewheeling, usually things are more nuanced than that. There's usually a combination of factors. And if there isn't a combination of factors, then you're pretty one-dimensional.